Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress, and I'll be your host for the next hour. And I'm glad you could tune in. I hope you will appreciate the following chapters in this book. Previously, we've been reading historical accounts proving the assertion that the papacy is Antichrist. Now we're going to talk about current events. And we're currently, let me turn back a couple pages here, make sure I don't flub up. We're currently discussing chapter 53. It's entitled Pope for President. We're now discussing the presidency of the United States and how the presidency of the United States kowtows to his little god in Rome. Who really controls our government? Is it we the people? Or is it he, the Pope? The assertion will be clearly outlined in this book that the Pope, as always, reigneth over the kings of the earth. Now, yesterday we talked about the president referring to the Pope as Holy Father, and speaking of Antichrist Pope John Paul II, and that there were coins minted in this country. Official American silver eagles, published by printed by the United States Mint, and on the coin was in relief pictures of Pope John Paul II, and they were made in honor of quote unquote Holy Father, celebrating John Paul II's election as the 264th Pope on October 16, 1978. That's right, the nation once called Protestant. Its government now lauds the papacy and follows its policies, both foreign and domestic, temporal and spiritual, and economic, and every other way. The ecumenical movement wasn't just for the churches. The ecumenical movement was to unite the spiritual and temporal swords of the papacy, to put them firmly in his hand, and then to wield them as he sees fit. And we're going to prove this as we continue in the book by P.D. Stewart, Codeword Barbelon. Now, beginning on the first full paragraph on page 358, if you're reading along, it says, then in St. Louis, USA, January 26th and 27th, and by the way, St. Louis, Missouri is a Jesuit stronghold in this country. In St. Louis, Missouri, USA, January 26th and 27th of 1999, when Pope John Paul II met with the then U.S. President Bill Clinton, a Jesuit-educated agent, for which we saw in Book 1 of P.D. Stewart's two-volume work entitled Codeword Barbelon, Bill Clinton, without blushing, addressed Pope John Paul II with the words, quote-unquote, Holy Father. Those are words of blasphemy. In a country that is Protestant, that enjoys the separation of church and state, here we have the elected, or the so-called elected president of the United States of America, referring to the Pope as Holy Father. And America wasn't outraged. Nonetheless, Mr. Clinton, without blushing, addressed John Paul II with the words, Holy Father, and at the same time bowed and kissed the Pope's ring, a symbol of the latter's power and authority. And I will add that Bill Clinton bowed and kissed that ring was a public display of who his commander-in-chief truly is, the Pope of Rome. It was an acknowledgement of his power and authority over his presidency. It says, the then most powerful leader in the free world, Bill Clinton, fawning and kissing the ring of an old Italian priest. And, of course, as uncouth as I am, I would have included the word pedophile priest, since it was he who protected the pedophile priests around the world. And it said, what a powerful statement to the world. What a powerful statement, not only to the people of the United States of America, but around the world, to see the acknowledged most powerful politician in the world, the President of the United States, bowing and kissing the ring of the Pope. Now, Revelation chapter 13, verse 2 says, quote, speaking of the papacy, his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast, unquote. The beast here being symbolic of the national power of the Vatican, its temporal power. For a beast in Bible prophecy is almost always symbolic of a nation or kingdom. See Daniel chapter 7, verse 17 through 20. Revelation 13:8 further states, quote, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, that is the Pope, whose names are not written in the book of life, unquote. And according to F. Tupper Saucy, pardon my tongue this morning, Catholic power is so strong in America that at one time in the recent past, almost, quote, the entire Senate Foreign Relations Committee was governed by Roman Catholics, unquote. In fact, according to the 1992 World Almanac of U.S. Politics, there was virtually no arena of federal legislative activity that was not directly controlled by a Roman Catholic senator or representative. Virtually every aspect of secular life in America came under the chairmanship of one of these Roman Catholic laypersons. Coincidence? No, ladies and gentlemen, it's by design. The Pope rules this country, and I just happen to have a copy of F. Tupper Saucy's book, Rulers of Evil, and I'm going to read directly from that book, interjecting a portion of F. Tupper Saucy's book, Rulers of Evil, to substantiate what P.D. Stewart has just claimed. This is from chapter 1 of the book. It's entitled Subliminal Rome. And it begins by saying, when a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter announced in 1992 Time magazine cover story that a, quote, conspiracy, unquote, binding President Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul II into a, quote-unquote, secret holy alliance had brought about the demise of communism, at least one reader saw through the hype. Professor Carol A. Brown of the University of Massachusetts fired off a letter to Times editors saying, quote, last week I taught my students about the separation of church and state. This week I learned that the Pope is running U.S. foreign policy. No wonder our young people are cynical about American ideals, unquote. What Brown had learned from Carl Bernstein, I had discovered for myself over several years of private investigation. The papacy really does run the United States foreign policy and always has. Yes, Bernstein noted that the leading American players behind the Reagan-Vatican conspiracy to a man were devout Roman Catholics. And here are their names and their positions, their high positions in U.S. government. William Casey, CIA Director, and I will add Knight of Malta. Richard Allen, National Security Advisor. Judge William Clark, National Security Advisor. Alexander Haig, Secretary of State, high-level Freemason. Vernon Walters, Ambassador at Large. William Wilson, Ambassador to the Vatican State. And the author continues, he says, but the reporter neglected to mention that the entire Senate Foreign Relations Committee was governed by Roman Catholics. Here are their names. Joseph Biden, Subcommittee on European Affairs. Now he's Vice President. Paul Sarbanes, International Economic Policy, Trade, Oceans, and Environment. Daniel P. Moynihan, Near East and South Asian Affairs. John Kerry, terrorism, narcotics, and international communications, and Christopher Dodd, Western Hemisphere and Peace Corps affairs. Now, the author continues. He says, Bernstein would have been wandering off point to list the Roman Catholic leaders of the American domestic policy. Not only foreign policy does the Pope run, but domestic policy, such as Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell and Speaker of the House Tom Foley. In fact, when the Holy Alliance story hit the stands, there was virtually no arena of federal legislative activity, according to the 1992 World Almanac of U.S. Politics, that was not directly controlled by a Roman Catholic senator or representative. The committees and subcommittees of the United States Senate and House Representatives governing commerce, communications and telecommunications, energy, medicine, health, education and welfare, human services, consumer protection, financial and financial institutions, transportation, labor and unemployment, hazardous materials, taxation, bank regulation, currency and monetary policy. Listen to this one. Oversight of the Federal Reserve System, commodity prices, rent services, small business administration, urban affairs, European affairs, Near Eastern and South Asian affairs, terrorism, narcotics, international communications, international economic trade, oceans, environment policy, insurance, housing, community development, federal loan guarantees, economic stabilization measures, including wage and price controls, gold and precious metal transactions, agriculture, animal and forest industries, rural issues, nutrition, price supports, food for peace, agricultural exports, soil conservation, irrigation, stream channelization, flood control, minority enterprise, environment and pollution, appropriations, and don't forget appropriations, defense, foreign operations, vaccines, drug labeling and packaging, drug and alcohol abuse, inspection and certification of fish and processed foods, use of vitamins and saccharin, national health insurance proposals, human services, legal services, family relations, and the arts and humanities, the handicap, the aging, in other words, virtually every aspect of secular life in America came under the direct chairmanship of one of these Roman Catholic laypersons. Frank Annunzio, Joseph Biden, Silvio Conti, Kika de la Garza, John Dingell, Christopher Dodd, Vic Fazio, James Florio, Henry Gonzalez, Thomas Harkin, Edward Kennedy, John Kerry, John LaFalk, Patrick Leahy, Charles Lucan, Edward Madigan, Edward Markey, Joseph McDade, Barbara Mikulski, George Miller, Daniel Moynihan, John Murtha, Mary Rose Oker, David Obey, Claiborne Pell, Charles Rangel, Dan Rostenkowski, and Edward Roybal. Vatican Council II. Its Constitution on the Church, published in 1964. Listen carefully. Instructs politicians to use their secular offices, their political offices, to advance the cause of Roman Catholicism. That's right, Vatican Council II, the Ecumenical Council, instructs all Roman Catholics to use their political offices to advance the cause of Roman Catholicism. Catholic laypersons, quote, whoever they are, are called upon to expend all their energy for the growth of the church and its continuous sanctification, and to make the Roman Catholic Church present and operative in those places and circumstances where only through them can it become the salt of the earth. So not only are politicians to use their offices to advance the causes of Roman Catholicism, but every Catholic layperson. This was Article 4, Part 33 of Vatican Council II. And it says, Vatican II further instructs all Catholics, quote, by their competence in secular disciplines and by their activities to vigorously contribute their effort so that the goods of this world may be more equitably distributed, or I would rather say redistributed, among all men, and may in their own way be conducive to universal progress in human and Christian freedom, and to remedy the customs and conditions of the world if they are an inducement to sin, so that they all may be conformed to this world, that they all may be conformed to the norms of justice and may favor the practice of virtue rather than hinder it. Article 4, Part 36. And there you have substantiation of P.D. Stewart's assertion from Rulers of Evil by F. Tupper Saucy. This country is Roman Catholic, becoming Roman Catholic from the top down and from the bottom up. From the Roman Catholic politicians in control of every aspect of our lives in this country, all the way down to the Roman Catholic street sweeper. All are under command of the Pope to make America Catholic. And that's precisely what we're seeing. We're seeing presidents of the United States, of the once most free nation in the world, now acknowledging the Pope with the most blasphemous term ever uttered, Holy Father. Every aspect now of our secular and religious life in America now comes under the control of the Roman Catholic Church. It says under President Bush, Catholic power increased still further. Back to P.D. Stewart's book, beginning now on the top of page, 359 if you're following along. Daniel Burke writes in the Washington Post, quote, this Protestant president has surrounded himself with Roman Catholic intellectuals, speechwriters, professors, priests, bishops, and politicians. These Catholics, and thus Catholic social teaching, have for the past 8 years been shaping Bush's speeches, policies, and legacy, unquote. And Burke adds, quote, if Bill Clinton can be called America's first black president, some say George W. Bush could well be the nation's first Catholic president, unquote. But yes, there was a John F. Kennedy, but where John F. Kennedy sought to divorce his religion from his office, George W. Bush has welcomed Roman Catholic doctrine and teaching into the White House and has based many important domestic policy decisions on them. Again, a quote from Daniel Burke. Rick Santorum, recent presidential candidate, the former U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania, a devout Roman Catholic, and a Knight of Malta, opined, quote, I don't think there's any question about it. The Catholic president, Bush, certainly much more Catholic than Kennedy, unquote. And Daniel Burke confirms, quote, former Bush speechwriter Michael Gerson, another evangelical with an affinity for Catholic teachings, I call them ecumenical evangelibellies, says that the key to understanding Bush's domestic policy is to view it through the lens of Rome. Paul Weyrich, an architect of the religious right, goes even further. He says he detected in Bush the same mindset as former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who converted to Catholicism in 2007. Quote, "I think he's a secret believer," says Weyrich. Similarly, John Julio, Bush's first director of faith-based initiatives, has called the president, quote-unquote, a closet Catholic. And the rumors are coming from the Vatican, too. The Catholic News Agency confirms, this is a Catholic source, quote, "Bush may be considering converting to Catholicism at the end of his presidential term. Bush's political advisor invited Catholic intellectuals who were Jesuit priests to Texas to explain the teachings of the church, that is, the Roman Catholic Church, to the president," unquote. Just before leaving office, George W. Bush Jr. openly demonstrated to the American people his return to the faith of his great-grandfather, George Burt Walker, and his ancestors, Roman Catholicism. As I revealed in Book 1, Burt Walker was a Roman Catholic who was trained by the Jesuits at their college in Stonyhurst, England, and only a few decades ago, the entire Bush family were staunch Roman Catholics, unquote. Mr. Bush was publicly photographed at a Mass. I have a picture of that photo. I have a copy of that photograph, by the way. It's available on the Internet. Anybody can see it. Just go to Google Images and type in the terms George W. Bush and Mass, and you'll find a picture. Scroll down through the photographs. You'll see it for yourself. Mr. Bush was publicly photographed at a Mass, folding his arms before his chest as he received ashes traced on his forehead in the shape of a cross from a Catholic bishop on the Catholic Holy Day, Ash Wednesday. Bush was also at a Mass at the Cathedral at St. Matthew the Apostle, Washington, D.C., April 2nd, 2005. But the clearest evidence of President George W. Bush's submission to the Pope and his allegiance to the Papal Church was seen on April 15, 2008, when Bush gave an extensive interview with Eternal Word Television Network. That's right, EWTN, the official Roman Catholic channel in this country. And I've mentioned this repeatedly on the program. Some will find it repetitious, others will be newly informed. EWTN's anchor, Raymond Arroyo, who I call Mr. Catholic, using the present tense, asked President Bush concerning the apostolic visit of the Pope in April of 2008, quote, "When you look into Pope Benedict XVI's eyes, what do you see?" To which Mr. Bush immediately and without hesitation replied, "God." That's right, the President of the United States, George W. Bush, who put himself out as a Protestant to get elected, publicly acknowledged Pope Benedict XVI as God. And to be Catholic, that's what you must believe. His title is Vicar of Christ, the replacement of the Son of God on earth, and the President publicly acknowledged Pope Benedict XVI, Antichrist Pope Benedict XVI, as God. Now you know what's wrong with our government. And for the record, for my critics, I have no pecuniary interest in this book. I do not sell it. I do not profit from it. I don't take a dime. Not only do I not take a dime for advertising this book, but I don't take a dime for doing this program either. I don't even publish my address. Nobody can send me money. Nobody knows where I live. So, now, in April 2000, talking about the Pope's, in preparation for the Pope's visit to America in 2008, President George W. Bush was invited as a guest on the World Over Live by Raymond Arroyo, a special papal coverage, portion of the papal coverage of the visit, invited George W. Bush to come and speak. And at the end of the interview between Raymond Arroyo, Mr. Catholic, on EWTN, Raymond Arroyo asked the president, when you look into the Pope Benedict XVI's eyes, what do you see? George W. replied, God. And that's what ails not only the United States, but the world. The kings of the earth acknowledge him as the representation of Christ on earth. They recognize the biblical Antichrist. And this once free nation where there was separation of church and state has now become, from the highest office of this country, an acknowledger of the Pope. And it's going to bring the curse of God upon this nation. If this nation doesn't repudiate the ecumenical movement, both religiously, politically, and socially, and economically, God's wrath will fall on this country. It's a virtual certainty. And I believe that's what bodes for the United States of America. God's undiluted wrath. Now the author continues, he says, there, reader, what more proof do you want? In fact, Mr. Bush on another occasion went so far as to say, quote, the best way to honor Pope John Paul II is to take his teachings seriously and to put his words and teachings into action here in America, unquote. I wish to ask, where's the separation of church and state in that? Do you know why we have the separation clause and the non-establishment clause in the Bill of Rights of the Constitution of the United States? To prevent Roman Catholicism and popery from taking over the government. Acknowledging the power and influence over the kings of the earth that the papacy exerted during the Dark and Middle Ages, some of our founding fathers had Protestant leanings and understood the danger that the United States would be in if the Pope ever usurped his authority over the government of this country. And as a stopgap measure, they separated church and state. It was to keep the church from taking control of the government. Now we have our government openly, brazenly, unconstitutionally acknowledging the Roman Catholic Church and its head, the biblical Antichrist. What next? Pope for president? That's a rhetorical question asked by this author, but I'm going to make an assertion. The Pope is the president of this country by proxy. The presidents of the United States of this country are picked by the Vatican. And they're judged by how well they obey their little god in Rome. Now here's a photograph in this book, very, very powerful and telling. Most people wouldn't understand the significance of this. This is a photograph taken in 2008. It's a photograph of Antichrist Pope Benedict XVI with outstretched hand and Nancy Pelosi worshipfully bowing and kissing the Pope's ring, with George W. Bush looking over the Pope's shoulder to make sure he does it correctly when it becomes his turn to pay obeisance to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the self-professed Antichrist, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Read it in Revelation chapter 17. He professes himself to be the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and they acknowledge him as such by kissing his ring. Now this author is going to bring us to even more contemporary times. The presidency of President Barack Obama. Chapter 54 is entitled, Obama Profoundly Affected by Roman Catholic Teachings. Oh, and I'll bet you thought Barack Obama was Muslim. That's what you're supposed to believe. First, a quote from President John F. Kennedy, the first officially Roman Catholic president who virtually went to war against the papacy during his administration, and that's why he was killed. This quote was taken from his speech at Columbia University on the 13th of November, 1963, only 10 days before his assassination. And this quote, as much as many other quotes taken from President John F. Kennedy, exposed the war that he was waging against that little god in Rome, which got him assassinated. Here's the quote. Listen carefully to this. This is very, very telling. The high office of president has been used to foment a plot to destroy America's freedom, and before I leave office, I must inform the citizen of his plight. Unquote. That was a shot over the bow of the papacy. He was ready to tell the American people who was trying to control his administration. And they killed him. His own church killed him. The author begins by saying, on January 20th, 2009, history was made in America when the 44th president to be sworn in as the head of the mighty United States of America was a black man, Barack Hussein Obama. The new president, peace be upon him, the author says, obviously tongue-in-cheek, has had the most rapturous messianic laurels placed on his head. Quote, Obama to me must be not just an ordinary human being, but indeed an advanced soul, come to lead America out of this mess, unquote. That from Lynn Sweet, Chicago Sun-Times, March 21st, 2008. The Messianic laurels continue with another quote, this from former U.S. Senator Gary Hart, published in the Huffington Post on February 13, 2008. Quote, he's not operating on the same plane as ordinary politicians. The agent of transformation in an age of revolution, as a figure uniquely qualified to open the door to the 21st century, unquote. Can't you just hear the drum rolls and the trumpet sound? Another quote. He won't just heal our city, states, and souls. He won't just bring the heavenly kingdom, dreamt of in both Platonism and Christianity to earth. He will heal the earth itself, unquote. This from Micah Tillman, July 10, 2008, published in the Free Liberal. Here's some more messianic laurels. The event itself is so extraordinary, speaking of his election, that another chapter could be added to the Bible to chronicle its significance, unquote. That from Reverend Jesse Jackson, Politico, June 5th, 2008. The author says, why are so many people enthralled with Barack Obama? Because as Jeremy Taylor once said, quote, ignorance is the mother of devotion, unquote. And so we have the Obama soap opera. But Obama is no mere fairy tale, but appears to be something very sinister about this affable gentleman. We're about to find out what Barack Obama is really made of. Someone has said, quote, Obama has political skills comparable to Reagan and Clinton. He has a way of making you think he's on your side, agreeing with your position while doing the very opposite. Pay no attention to what he says. Rather, watch what he does, unquote. The author says, I cannot say for sure who the author of this statement was, but it seems that it may not be too far from the truth. The following facts certainly give cause for further inquiry. On July 8, 2009, Vatican officials announced that President Barack Obama would have his first audience with the Pope, Pope Benedict XVI, on July 10th of that year. Notice who was issuing the announcement. Was it the White House? Was it Mr. Obama's press officers? Was it the U.S. media? No, it was the Vatican. Mr. Obama and his agents were so arrogant that Fox News reported that the White House would, quote, not confirm the meeting, unquote. That's right. The President of the United States wouldn't talk to the press about this meeting with the Pope. Wouldn't confirm it or deny it. Why? Because he was under the Pope's authority. He was not under the American people's authority, nor the press. Does Mr. Obama realize that he is accountable to the American people? Why then were they hearing about this from the Vatican press office and not from the White House or the U.S. media? It seems most unlikely that it was the Pope who requested to see Mr. Obama, as Vatican spokesman Reverend Federico Lombardi said on Wednesday, July 8th. The Vatican had informed the White House that Benedict is available to meet the president that afternoon, unquote. The wording of that statement from the Vatican that the Pope was, quote-unquote, available strongly suggests that the Pope was responding to a request and not making one. For if the Pope was making the request, there would be no need to issue a statement about his availability. Naturally, if you request a meeting with someone on a certain day, you ought to be available that day, right? But more importantly, why is Mr. Obama having a private meeting with the Pope after the G8 summit? What business does the President of the United States of America, an elected leader of a free people, have seeing the Pope, an unelected, undemocratic, religious autocrat, in a private meeting? Why do the presidents of the United States seek counsel from the self-proclaimed replacement of the Son of God on earth? Why do elected officials of this country consult with the biblical Antichrist in a nation that is supposed to acknowledge the separation of church and state? Why do the American people sit still when our most powerful politicians seek counsel from the biblical Antichrist, the head of the Roman Catholic Church state, a sovereign, hostile, extremely hostile regime against this Protestant nation? What does Mr. Obama have to discuss with Pope Benedict that he cannot allow the American public to hear? Was Obama on a personal visit to the G8 summit, or was it not a state concern? That's right. It was a religious concern. The President of the United States, Barack Obama, who was elected, who was picked to be a candidate for president, who was obviously elected by the Pope's minions here in this country, had to go pay his obeisance to the Pope. It says the whole matter was unconstitutional, undemocratic, and highly improper. But such is the audacity of deceit. That's the kind of change you can believe in. Do you find my comments concerning Obama deprecatory? Reader, you will shortly have opportunity to judge for yourself the validity of my concerns about President Barack Obama. Veritas temporis filia, for truth is the daughter of time. And here we have a photograph of a headline: Pope blesses Obama contrary to Vatican protocol. That's right. The Pope even violated Vatican protocol and publicly praised and blessed Barack Obama, the president of this country. I'll just read the first few lines of this article. Pope Benedict sent a message of congratulations to Barack Obama to hail the historic occasion of his election as U.S. president. The Roman Catholic pontiff expressed to Mr. Obama, quote, his blessing so that God will support him and the American people, and that all people of goodwill can work to build a world of peace, solidarity, and justice, unquote. So there is the Pope congratulating his candidate for achieving his election and then setting his agenda. It was in print, in a paper in the United States of America. No outrage. The papacy was openly setting the agenda for the President of the United States. And the Protestants were silent. Well, Inquisition Update will no longer be silent. And thank God for P.D. Stewart. The book continues, it says, the Pope was so jubilant with the 2008 U.S. election result that he broke with the Vatican's firm protocol and sent a personal note of congratulations to Barack Obama the day after the latter was elected, rather than for waiting to send the official telegram on the day of Obama's inauguration. In response, Obama presented the Pope with a stole. Now, this is important. Barack Obama presented the Pope with a gift, a stole, a relic, from the enshrined body of Cardinal John Henry Newman, who lived from 1811 to 1860, an influential 19th century American bishop, and we've read all about John Henry Newman in this book. It says the stole is worn only by deacons, priests, and bishops as a sign of their priestly authority. This stole had been draped around the enshrined body of Saint, now Saint, so he's been canonized a saint in the Roman Catholic Church, John Henry Newman in Philadelphia for nearly 20 years. And Mr. Obama took it and gave it as a gift to the Pope. What a gift, reader, what a gift. What is the message in this? Think about it for a while. The relic of a dead bishop sent as a gift by Barack Obama to the Pope? Does Obama believe in relics? You better believe he does. And despite his outward profession of Protestantism and his outward profession of Islam and all of his other outward professions, he is in fact Roman Catholic. He answers to the Pope. He worships and wonders after the beast. It is the Pope of Rome to whom he pays homage. He's an ecumenical mutt. He can worship any god in the pantheon of gods so long as he kisses the Pope's ring and does what he says. Obama was also invited to receive an honorary degree from the leading U.S. Roman Catholic University, Notre Dame, but had to, quote-unquote, publicly decline as dozens of U.S. bishops denounced the university. Why was that all taking place? Simply as a way to dispel any rumors that Barack Obama was Roman Catholic. It was stage play. Reader, the action of these bishops were pretense, says P.D. Stewart, who is absolutely correct about this. The action of these bishops was pretense, for it should have been obvious to them that the Pope's very public pre-inaugural congratulations to Barack Obama is proof that their little God in Rome approves of this man. Moreover, Barack Obama was elected as president by 54% of the Catholic votes. Most of these voters were encouraged to vote that way by their priests. Now, under the subtitle, Obama profoundly affected by Catholic teachings, this is where the rubber meets the road. You know, the Pope can, the President of the United States can kowtow to the Pope, but you have to look at what a person does to assess their true beliefs. On July 9th and 10th of 2009, leaders of the Group of Eight, the G8 industrialized nations, were in Italy to assess the risks to the global economy and other key issues. At 9:38 on July 10th, Jeffrey Brown of PBS, during Jim Lehre's NewsHour, talked to political analyst Margaret Warner, who was reporting live on the scene in Italy about Barack Obama's private meeting with Pope Benedict XVI. Here's what she said in response to the following question by Jeffrey Brown. Quote, Margaret, the president met with the Pope today, we were told, hoping to find some areas of agreement on the economy and other international issues. What can you tell us? Unquote. Mrs. Warner's reply, quote, we, speaking of the news media, were told repeatedly by Barack Obama's advisors that this meeting with the Pope today, quote, was much more than a state visit. That he, meaning Barack Obama, has been profoundly affected by Catholic teachings, was a student in Catholic school in Indonesia, that the community organization which he worked in the south side of Chicago was partly funded by a Roman Catholic organization, and more broadly, the teachings of social justice. The Catholic teachings of social justice has profoundly affected him. And so he was looking forward to this visit because, as well as on the practical side, Obama sees in the Pope a natural ally, again, on themes of social justice, and that they can really make common cause on a number of these broader themes, particularly international issues. And you can take that to mean global issues, because Barack Obama is on board with the biblical Antichrist, and he's helping, he's doing his part, along with the rest of the kings of this earth, to assemble this global government, this global religion, this global economical system, this global social system for the Pope. Now, the Pope and a Protestant president, natural allies. Now, remember, Barack Obama initially put himself out as a Protestant, didn't he? He's a mutt. He's an ecumenical mutt. He can pretend to be anything he wants. Just look whose ring he kisses. Again, it says the Pope and a Protestant president, natural allies, having a common cause. What cause is that, Mr. Obama? Having stated what journalist colleagues were told by Obama's advisors, Mrs. Warner went on to give her own assessment on the Obama's visit to the Pope, saying, quote, I would think that on both a personal level as well as a political one, this visit is far more than a courtesy call for this president. This is really one of the highlights of the trip for him, unquote. Yes, right. The G8 summit was just a sideline to the official private meeting between Barack Obama and his commander-in-chief in Rome. And that spells doom for the United States of America. And if the American people, God's people, don't stand up and protest, then we'll just be ecumenical. I'll see you on the program tomorrow.